Except
to American people.
Except that there are disagreements, and let's go litigate those disagreements rather than trying to fight it out in the American media when you're wrong.
What happens when a vice president breaks with a president? Throughout American history, these fractures have signaled major political shifts. Today, we're examining the dynamics of executive branch relationships, what causes them to break down, and what it means when political allies become adversaries. This is a deep dive into political strategy, loyalty, and power. To understand the significance of vice presidential independence, we need to examine historical precedent. The relationship between a president and vice president is unique in American politics, part partnership, part insurance policy, and often complicated by ambition. Consider some famous examples. John Adams and Thomas Jefferson started as president and vice president, but became bitter political rivals. John C. Calhoun resigned as vice president over fundamental disagreements with Andrew Jackson. More recently, Al Gore carefully distanced himself from Bill Clinton during the 2000 campaign, despite serving together for 8 years. These fractures typically occur for three main reasons. First, genuine policy disagreements that become irreconcilable. Second, political calculation, when the VP believes association with the president damages their own future prospects. And third, legal or ethical concerns that make continued support untenable. The most dramatic modern example was Mike Pence's decision to certify the 2020 Electoral College results, despite intense pressure from President Trump. That decision represented a constitutional crisis point, where the VP chose adherence to established procedures over political loyalty. What made Pence's decision significant wasn't just the political fallout, it was the constitutional principle at stake. When a vice president breaks from a president over fundamental questions of law or governance, it signals that internal pressures have reached critical levels. Let's examine what political scientists call the loyalty dilemma that vice presidents face. Understanding this helps us analyze any situation where executive branch unity fractures. Vice presidents are chosen to balance tickets, deliver key constituencies, or provide expertise the president lacks. But once in office, they face competing pressures. They must remain loyal to the president who selected them, but they also have their own political futures to consider. Research from political scientists at Princeton and Stanford shows that vice presidents typically follow a predictable pattern. In the first term, loyalty is nearly absolute. The VP's success is tied entirely to the president's success. But as second terms progress, or if the president faces serious legal or political trouble, VPs begin positioning themselves as independent actors. This isn't cynicism, it's rational political behavior. A vice president who goes down with a troubled president has no political future. One who strategically distances themselves can preserve or even enhance their standing. George H.W. Bush successfully navigated this during Iran-Contra, maintaining enough distance from the scandal while supporting Reagan overall. Dick Cheney had unusual influence precisely because he had no presidential ambitions. Joe Biden carefully managed his relationship with Obama while preparing his own eventual campaign. Now let's examine what happens when legal issues, rather than just political differences, create rifts between a president and vice president. Vice presidents receive classified briefings, attend national security meetings, and have access to sensitive information about executive branch activities. If that information includes potential legal violations, the VP faces a unique dilemma. Unlike other administration officials who can resign quietly, the vice president's position is constitutional. They can't simply quit over policy disagreements without creating a political earthquake. So when VPs signal concerns about potential legal issues, it carries extraordinary weight. Consider a hypothetical scenario. If a vice president became aware of potential violations of federal law, whether related to financial transactions, classified information handling, or other serious matters, what are their options? They could remain silent and hope issues resolve themselves, but this creates personal legal risk. They could resign, but this appears cowardly and ends their political career. Or they could strategically signal concerns to Congress while maintaining their position, protecting themselves legally while preserving political viability. This third option is extraordinarily risky, but potentially most effective. By cooperating with congressional oversight or signaling they won't obstruct investigations, a VP can position themselves as prioritizing constitutional duty over personal loyalty. The vice president's constitutional role as president of the Senate creates unique dynamics that become critical during presidential crises. Under the Constitution, the VP presides over the Senate and casts tie-breaking votes. But they also serve as a crucial communication channel between the executive and legislative branches. When that relationship shifts, political calculations throughout Washington change dramatically. If senators believe the vice president won't aggressively defend the president during oversight hearings or potential impeachment proceedings, it fundamentally alters their political calculus. Senators who might fear retribution from a unified executive branch become more willing to assert congressional authority.
Historical voting analysis shows that impeachment proceedings require not just legal evidence, but political permission. Senators need political cover to vote against a president from their own party. A vice president who signals even subtle independence provides that cover. During Nixon's crisis, Vice President Gerald Ford initially defended Nixon, but gradually became less vocal as evidence mounted. This subtle shift signaled to Republican senators that breaking from Nixon wouldn't mean political suicide. The pattern repeated during Clinton's impeachment, though with different outcomes. The mathematical threshold for conviction in impeachment is 67 Senate votes, 2/3 of the chamber. This requires significant bipartisan support. When a vice president from the president's own party signals they won't actively oppose such proceedings, it removes a major obstacle to reaching that threshold. Let's analyze the political strategy at play when a vice president creates distance from a troubled president. From a purely strategic standpoint, this represents a calculated risk-reward analysis. The risks are obvious: alienating the president's base, being labeled a traitor by loyalists, and potentially facing retaliation from the administration. But the potential rewards are significant. If the president faces serious legal jeopardy, early distancing protects the VP from being implicated. If the president's political standing is declining, independence preserves the VP's own future prospects. And if legal proceedings result in removal, the VP becomes president. This isn't to suggest VPs cynically engineer presidential downfalls. Rather, when facing inevitable political crises, rational actors position themselves to survive and potentially benefit from the fallout. Political scientists call this strategic positioning during regime uncertainty. It explains why administration officials begin leaking to journalists, why cabinet members suddenly discover scheduling conflicts, and why previously loyal allies become unavailable for media defense. The key indicator to watch is whether the distancing is subtle or explicit. Subtle distancing, being less available, offering qualified support, suggests hedging bets. Explicit breaks, public disagreements, cooperation with investigations, signal fundamental fractures that rarely heal. Beyond the political theater, these dynamics raise important questions about governance, accountability, and constitutional design. The framers of the Constitution created a system of checks and balances, but didn't fully anticipate modern political parties. They assumed institutional loyalty would trump personal or partisan loyalty. The vice presidency was designed as a constitutional office, not just a political position. When vice presidents assert independence, especially on questions of law and constitutional duty, they're arguably fulfilling the framers' vision. The office serves as a check on presidential power, particularly during crises. However, this creates governance challenges. A fractured executive branch struggles to implement policy effectively. Foreign adversaries may see opportunity in internal divisions, and the public loses confidence when leaders appear more focused on positioning than governing. The tension between loyalty and accountability is inherent in the American system. We want officials loyal enough to implement coherent policy, but independent enough to resist illegal or unconstitutional directives. Finding that balance is one of democracy's ongoing challenges. So, what can we learn from examining vice presidential independence and the fracturing of executive branch relationships? First, these relationships are fundamentally transactional. Loyalty persists as long as it serves mutual interests. When those interests diverge, whether due to legal concerns, political calculation, or genuine principle, alliances break. Second, constitutional design matters. The vice president's dual role as executive branch member and Senate president creates unique dynamics during crises. This design feature, whether intentional or not, provides a pressure valve when executive power needs checking. Third, political survival instincts are powerful. Officials facing potential legal jeopardy or political fallout will prioritize self-preservation.
This isn't necessarily cynical, it's how systems of power actually function when tested by crisis. And finally, these moments of political fracture, while dramatic, serve important functions. They force accountability, expose problems that might otherwise remain hidden, and demonstrate that no position provides absolute immunity from consequences. As we watch current events unfold, understanding these dynamics helps us separate genuine constitutional crises from normal political theater. It helps us evaluate whether officials are acting on principle or calculation. And it reminds us that the American system, for all its flaws, contains mechanisms for holding even the most powerful accountable. The relationship between presidents and vice presidents will continue to evolve with each administration. Some partnerships thrive, others fracture. But examining these patterns helps us understand how power actually works in American government, not how we wish it worked, but how it actually functions when tested by crisis. If you value this kind of analytical, educational content that examines political dynamics without partisan spin, subscribe to News Vault. We break down how government and politics actually work using history, political science, and constitutional analysis. What other aspects of executive branch dynamics should we analyze? What historical examples would you like us to examine? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching News Vault, where we examine the forces that shape American politics. I'll see you in the next one.